Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. It feels like it's been an eternity since I've put these things on, but we finally got an album good enough to warrant these stupid cat glasses. And that album is none other than Patience by Mannequin Kitty. Now, I'll be honest, I've never listened to any of Mannequin Kitty's albums prior to this. But they are a punk rock group that has a very powerful presence both in vocals and instrumentation, akin to mid to late 2000s Paramore, mixed with a bit more elements of punk rock and occasionally some elements of hard rock or even metal at times. So, this album stacked up to be absolutely amazing from start to finish. I love the aggressive, powerful, energetic guitar riffs that line all the songs on here. The vocal performances are strong. They're just strong and energetic and full of life and emotion and really brings you into the story that's being told on here. And on top of that, the story itself, the lyrics are amazingly written. They tell a really touching yet heartbreaking story of an abusive relationship and the cycle that the one being abused goes through of love and frustration and questioning, and it just becomes this vicious cycle that seems impossible to get out of. And even though it is a relatively short album, it doesn't even hit the 30-minute mark, this is okay because I think this album is made to be played multiple times in a row because of this cycle. Because the very last song on the album transitions very well into the first song on the album, both stylistically and lyrically, which I'll get into later. So, the songs themselves. The opening track, which is also the title track, Patience, has this really fun punk guitar riff to it, and it lines out the basic themes of the album, where she's talking about her very patient manner when it comes to the relationship that she's in. How she feels patience just goes through her blood, that she's got so much patience inside of her for putting up with this person that she's with. And it doesn't quite get into the details of why she needs this patience quite yet, but it does establish that her relationship is definitely rocky and it's far from perfect. Then the next song, Drunk 2, has this really enchantingly beautiful yet aggressive at certain points guitar work to it. I love the drumming on this song. I love how soft, warm, and comforting the instrumentals are while still being very fun and lively at the same time. And this song, Drunk 2, actually outlines the abuse that's going on and shows it to be what appears to be physical abuse. And she talks about all the different things that she has to experience through this, and even though she doesn't necessarily go into details of how she's abused, she does talk about the effects that it has on her, where it forces her to drink until she can't feel anymore, to pretend like she's doing amazing. And she talks about how other people say, "Oh wow, you're so strong, you're so brave through all this stuff," and she talks about also how she hates that perception, how she wants to feel loose and weak and be seen as someone who needs help, rather than being seen as someone who is powerful and on their own. And I think that's a really great testament to working through problems as a group versus independence and individuality, where even though it's important that we do work through stuff on our own, at least to a certain extent, we can't solve everything in our lives by ourselves. And whether that requires us to reach out for help from others, or requires us to make the first step to help others who are too afraid to ask, it really does show how even if we mean the best through a compliment, we actually may be continuing something hurtful, where we're just simply not doing anything to stop it and just congratulating a person for enduring it. So then this goes on after she talks about she fakes how she has to deal with all this meaningless, feelingless sex and how she has to fake her enjoyment of it, etc. and again going back through the drinking constantly just to try and endure. It goes into the song Cream, which I honestly thought was just okay. I thought it had one of the more forgettable guitar riffs on the album, and it's a very, very short song. It doesn't even hit the 2-minute mark. And I also don't really see how the lyrics tie into the themes of the album. I might just be missing some sort of symbolism to it, where she talks about her standing at the gates of her own hell. This might have something to do with her putting up with this abuse and constantly facing it without doing much to stop it, but it doesn't really add all that much to the album in my opinion, and it really is too brief to make any sort of a lasting footprint. However, the next song, Fear and Desire, was really, really beautiful in a very uncomfortable way, if that makes sense, where this one is her actually talking now to the person who has been abusing her, where she talks about how, or is questioning how, is her fear fueling his desires, where is pushing her up against the walls and hitting her and abusing her, whether it be verbally, physically, emotionally. Do all of these pains fuel the dark inner desires of this person? And she is just questioning the motives behind it. What is causing these disgusting, horrible, harmful actions to be taken out on her? And it's this really, like, kind of take a step back and wonder, well, if we're going to address the abuse, first we have to address why there is the abuse. What is causing it? What is the reasoning behind it? And I think that does show a lot of insight on her part, where she doesn't just see it as an issue of someone is being hurt, but seeing it as an issue of these are two broken people, and one is just expressing this broken nature in an unhealthy way. And that doesn't mean it's an excuse for the abuse in any way, or shape, or form, but it's just trying to address what's causing this. But that doesn't mean that she's willing to accept it, because we see next on the song Drunk 1, which I think is kind of peculiar how Drunk 1 comes 3 tracks after Drunk 2. And I do think this, again, has something to do with the cycle pattern of it goes over and over again, and that may even indicate that the album is actually out of order, which I think could be interesting, how really the story starts with maybe the 3rd or even 4th track, and it kind of goes on from there. But Drunk 1, although it is very brief, it's less than a minute, I love how it has this angry, energetic, outraging outburst of emotion that she just displays in this really energetic, really persuasive way, where I do think that this is another drunk outburst, hence the name, similar to how she does say some rather strange things at times on Drunk 2, obviously because she is drunk at times. And I don't mean strange in that it's abnormal or distracting, but just kind of the kinds of things a drunk person might say, or the way one might speak. And Drunk 1 is just this angry, unrelenting outburst out of nowhere, just like a drunk person might have these seemingly spontaneous, out-of-the-blue explosions of emotion, in this case being anger, obviously directed towards the person who's abusing her. And I think the instrumentals are amazing. I think her vocals are so angry and energetic, and they're really, really amazing at times. And the next song, High Horse, immediately just caps that off with a very soft, very gentle, and although it is still punk rock to an extent, it's much more soft. The mixing has much louder instrumentals and much softer vocals, which I think demonstrates this low that this drunkenness takes her to, where Drunk 1 was this high point of energy. High Horse is this lower point of just almost a depressive state at times. And even though the song does become more and more energetic as it goes through, eventually towards the end, once again carrying this more angry emotion, a lot of it, once again, is just dealing with this abuse, and it's showing her finally trying to take a stand against it. whether it be threatening to walk out, talking about how she sees that her significant other's world is burning and she's going to leave them there to burn, which I think is really powerful imagery brought out through the song. And it really does show her being just fed up with this abuse. And that transitions, like, I'll get into it in a second. It goes into the song Who You Are, which I also thought the instrumentals were nice. This is, like I said earlier, of how it connected to Paramore in a lot of ways. This sounds very similar to Paramore, again, with just maybe a spice of punk rock in there. The one thing I really had against this song is just the lyrics behind it. It really contrasts with everything established before this, where even though it has a nice sentiment to it, where this almost feels like one of those trying to be uplifting, inspirational tracks where, who taught you to hate to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the way that you are? Like, I love just the way you are. And I think, and I'll get into later why I think this would actually make more sense if you place this track towards the end of the album. But right here, it just has this really awkward state of, well, you just got out of this angry explosion towards him, and you obviously aren't even getting close to over it from the song High Horse, and then you're saying, who's causing you to hate yourself? You're amazing. You shouldn't change who you are. And it's really just this awkward contrast that I really think distracts from the album in a lot of ways. And again, I do think this song would actually work if it was placed towards the, like, maybe either the last track or the second to last track on the album, but it really just doesn't work here. Moving in from there, we have the song Clams. And Clams and the song after that, F.U.C.A.W., these two songs have the much more hard rock, metal feel to them. And I do think the instrumentals on Clams could have been a bit more energetic and really just had a bit more spice to them at times. They're not bad, but again, this is another one of those very brief songs that really doesn't give itself much of a chance to expand into much of anything too interesting. But the song F.U.C.A.W. is a much better hard rock song, where the instrumentals are much more lively. I love about midway through it when we start to get these hymns and these whispers going through the album, going through the song, and it becomes this really almost unsettlingly beautiful state where she is just done. She has this huge, angry, explosive, just done with everything that's going on. How she's leaving him, how she's going to find someone better, how she's sick of all this stuff that she is putting up with, and she finally just builds up the courage to explosively leave that horrible situation that she's in. I do think F.U.C.A.W. has a really, really great instrumental to it. I love the kind of unsettling opening instrumentals, and again, going to those much more fun and energetic hard rock pieces towards the chorus in the middle of the song. And this goes again to a very stark contrast to the concluding song, In Love Again, where it's a much more soft, loving song where we see her falling for this abuser once again, where she is thinking a lot about what's going on, and she realizes that she misses this person, and she lets this love blind her to the abuse that she faced. And as she goes on from this, she talks about lying next to him, being by his side, and just loving laying right there with him. And again, I do think this transitions beautifully into the opening cut on the album, because it starts off with her laying next to her significant other, pondering why she puts up with this, and reflecting on how patient she really is. And again, I do think that this plays a big part in the replayability, to where even though it's a very brief album, if you play it twice over, it becomes a much more standard, maybe even a bit longer than standard length. And it feels like a more cohesive project in a lot of ways, strangely enough, if you listen to it twice in a row, where this connection between the abuse and falling for the abuser, almost a Stockholm Syndrome kind of experience, really does make it amazing. And I've talked about this album a lot, especially the very troubling yet very real cycle that an abusive relationship can have on a person. So I don't want to talk about it too much more. This video is already longer than I really want it to be. But with all that being said, this is an amazing album. It has wonderful instrumentals, a really great story, and despite a couple of weak tracks, there's really not much bad going for this album. I'm feeling a strong 8 on it. Definitely check it out. It's a really fun, energetic, and lively punk rock album with a lot of depth to it. So if you check this album out, be sure to tell me what you thought of it. I'd love to hear your opinion. Be sure to tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.